I'd also like to start by thanking the Global Center for Pluralism and IDRC for availing us this opportunity to discuss our constitution, which, as you can see from both Yash and Karuti, we're very passionate about. And my role now is actually to sort of get out from what we've been talking, certain issues that I'd like for us to speak a little more about. But I'd like to start by saying that the 2010 Constitution is a very radical constitution. If you compare it to the Independence Constitution, whereas at that point one would have expected an overhaul of institutions, we didn't see that. And with the 2010 Constitution, it leaves nothing untouched. I'd like then, coming from that, to go to the whole question of expectations and basically impatience. One of the things that Kenyans seem to want it and want it now. If it is land rights, we want them now. And essentially what happens when the Constitution doesn't deliver instantly. And then to speak about then the challenges that come with that, and especially what we are now seeing, and I'd like to hear both Yash and Karuti's comments on the radicalization of youth that we see, and the intolerance also that we are seeing amongst different groups. Even though the Constitution provides for diversity, I don't think we've witnessed as much extremism, religious extremism. I was just saying that for the first time in my life, I went to church on Sunday with policemen guarding the church, and we haven't had that. And the question then is, how is it that after such a constitution that recognizes diversity, this is what we are seeing? There's another issue that Yash and Karuti spoke about, the fact that the Kenyan Constitution is relevant for other countries. And I'd like for them to speak a little about the bonding of African countries around the ICC issue and the leadership of Kenya in both the continent but also in the region, and what that then means for the implementation of Kenya's constitution. And speaking about that, and an issue again that is rife on the African continent now, which affects diversity, the whole question of anti-gay rights. The fact that we have both Uganda and Nigeria having the laws that they have, and this may be a flu that is going to cut across the newly bonded African continent. Just basically to hear a little bit about that. And the other issue that I'd like for them to talk a little bit about is we have new institutions. We have a new judiciary, which we are very proud of. We have a new executive. We have a new parliament with both the National Assembly and Senate. As these new institutions are grappling for space, we have seen a jostling for power. And the issue I'd like for Karuti and Yash to address is how do we deal with the principle of separation of powers when we have new institutions that are now trying to find their space within a reformed mosaic. And finally, just the whole question of what the country's foreign policy choices. These again may be linked to the ICC issue, but also the increasing look towards the East. What does this mean for pluralism?
Do you want to go last? Yeah, okay. My elders asked me to begin, and when you are sent by the elders, you don't turn it down. Let me begin with the question of radicalization of the youth. Radicalization of the youth on religious basis, more than anything else. This is a post-September 11 issue, if one may want to call it. And in the East African region, it has got much more to do with the events that are taking place in Somalia and then spilling over to the countries in the region. So we may not see it different from the global approach to the whole question of security. But when it comes to Kenya, I think the issue of radicalization of the youth cannot be seen in isolation from issues of marginalization of the youth and the question of youth unemployment, especially at the coast. In some places of the coast, like in Kilifi, 61% of the people was quotas, or people without secure land rights, in the 1990s. And over 40% in Kwale were living as landless. When you look at those particular numbers in this period of 2014, almost 20 years later, one may want to say there is the question of poverty as well that we could be addressing. So we cannot discuss radicalization of the youth without speaking much about questions of inequality and poverty, especially at the coast, which issues require a very different approach from religious approach. Some have argued that devolution is likely to address some of these particular challenges, especially as it creates employment opportunities for the youth and other, for the youth especially at the local level. The second issue I would like to deal with is the question of new institutions and the jostling for political power and political space. But again, the Constitution is very clear, and I think I may want to call this one the tensions of transition. We are just only 1 year old. It's about 13 months now since the coming to power of a new government, of the new government, and almost 3 years after the passing of the new constitution. I won't call it transitional moments, but transitional moments without very clear guidance can also be an issue of chaos. Parliament itself is a major threat to this particular space that we are talking about, because they are not only jostling for space with the judiciary and with the executive, but even between Senate and the National Assembly, we have seen tensions growing between them. And the question that they are fighting over is who is senior than the other. Is it the Senate or the National Assembly? Those are some of the issues that they could be fighting over, that they are fighting over, without, of course, any clear guidance from the speakers of both houses. The issue of separation of powers remains nagging, in the sense that each of them wants to take something from the other, whether it's the executive, whether it's parliament. But to them, to both parliament and the executive, their major threat is the judiciary today. And the reason why judiciary remains a major threat to the executive and parliament is because after passing of the new constitution, judiciary was the first institution to reform. I don't think in Canada here you have ever interviewed your Chief Justice or Supreme Court judges in open daylight in the presence of cameras and people being invited to come and ask you questions. If you have ever done anything when you were a child, it's asked in broad daylight in the presence of cameras and in open public. That's how we recruited our Chief Justice. That's how we recruited our judges of the High Court and judges of the Supreme Court after the passing of the new constitution. That was a radical departure from what we were used to. We were used to boardroom politics, we were used to boardroom deal cuttings. But then once the judiciary did this, people's confidence in the judiciary rose from that 8% in 2008 to 74% by late last year. In a period of 3 years, rising from that 8% in terms of people's trust and confidence to 70-something plus is a major achievement. Two, the judiciary has actually been able to face the executive in terms of reversing some of the decisions they have made. They have also reversed some of the decisions made by Parliament because the judiciary has been fighting on the side of the people. Now, both the executive and the Parliament are not very happy about these particular beginnings of the judiciary, and what we have seen in recent times is the executive and both houses of Parliament trying to clip the wings of the judiciary. In fact, as we move on, we are worried about this new threat to the judiciary itself. They have already begun by reducing its budget. They have cut the budget of the judiciary by a significant percent, simply to send a signal that we are not happy that you are reversing our decisions. But we hope the judiciary remains strong because it's the only sense of hope that Kenyans seem to be having at present.
I'll just make a couple of small points. I think the issue that has been raised by Patricia about the role of the African Union is really very worrying. Our president was able to mobilize strong support in Addis Ababa with the AU against the ICC. And this, of course, suits many other heads of state. So we often say the AU is a trade union of heads of governments. And it's very worrying also on the anti-gay rights. They seem to be coming together in support of Uganda's position. And I don't know what we can do about this. I think as my understanding or my sort of sense is that among many Africans, AU is losing its popularity, its appeal. It's playing on old arguments of we Africans being exploited. This is now a real renaissance of African. I don't think it persuades many people, but it is very much a state-oriented institution, and not much really can be done about that. As for gay rights, well, we all know that before you white people came to Africa, there was no gays, no lesbians, and it's a problem you have brought to us, and we'll deal with it the best we can way. On separation of powers, I agree with Karuti very much, but it is. As you know, in federations and more so in the newer federations than your federation, institutional arrangements become very complex. You do that through committees and so on. Other countries, this is part of the constitution, and you want to have cooperative relationship. You want to deal with problems in a political way rather than end up in courts every time. And to give it institutional expression, you do get quite a complex set of institutions and relationships. So we have that, though it's not fully federal system. It has many of the institutions, procedures that you find in the federal system. And it's all new. Even the institutions at the national level are new. I mentioned earlier that now we have a different kind of presidencies than before. So it is a complex area to work your way through. And the legislation isn't always very clear. And the additional problem is that we have been used to very authoritarian presidents who have overridden any notion of either rule of law or separation of powers. But now with the courts there, people are going to court, and as Karuti says, senators think they are more important than governors. Governors think they are more important because they represent the whole county. The National Assembly thinks they are more powerful than the Senate. Senators think they have a special mandate about devolution. But very few, I have to say, very few MPs have read the Constitution. They don't really understand the Constitution. And I would say when a number of quite important politicians stood for the Senate rather than for the National Assembly, I asked some of them, why are you standing for Senate? Surely it's the National Assembly which is powerful. Oh no, senator, American-style senator. And then they came to me and said, but you never told us. The senators have no power. I said, my dear chap, you were Attorney General when the draft was prepared, and you're blaming me for So they don't care, they don't read, there is no induction course, there's no training course for our MPs on account, on budgetary process, on all these issues, which are becoming complex. And you can't just say, I'm an MP elected by my people, and that is sufficient qualification. So nothing is done about that, and they're very arrogant. So I think it's compounded by all these factors, but I think it's absolutely critical to the success of the Constitution and relationships that people fully understand the mechanisms, procedures, divisions of powers, separations of power. And as we get into more debates and more resort to the courts, that kind of knowledge or understanding is really critical. And finally, I want to make a point not necessarily related to what we have said so far. But one thing which is emphasized a lot in the Constitution, but has received no attention whatsoever among governments or even many NGOs, is the whole question of social justice. The disparities of income are so high. I don't know if these figures are disputed. My figures are 60% of people live below poverty line. And every year since this process started of constitution making, over 10 years ago, the number of people trapped in poverty has increased without question. And Katiba Institute does some work in slums and so on, so we have first-hand experience of what life is like for majority of Kenyans. The Constitution makes social economic rights justiciable, and we have already gone to court on behalf of some communities in relation to their social economic rights, housing, health, doing now soon. But the government pays no attention whatsoever to this issue of social economic rights, and they're building these enormous railways connecting Indian Ocean with the Atlantic Ocean, costing millions and millions, corrupt deals made with Chinese companies. They don't spend a minute's thought on how can we improve the life of people. And Karuti's point is extremely valid when he said that the problem of radical youth is primarily a problem of poverty and deprivation. And unless that is dealt with, I think we are headed for, I don't know what, some great disaster.